there, welcome back to the channel. I'm McRed2, and today we're going to be covering a Steven Crowder video. I found his secondary channel, called Crowder Bits, where he uploads much more short-form content, which is easier to react to, rather than the 45-minute to an hour-long videos he's been doing lately, concerning Biden's comments during his town hall towards a woman that asked a question about transgender youth. I'm pretty sure Crowder's going to have some very ignorant and repugnant shit to say about transgender people. I have a hard time watching his videos because the man can't get through a fucking sentence without having to interject something in every sentence he says for the sole purpose of triggering the libs. He has to throw in something offensive into each sentence that he says, damn near, so that his audience of right-wing, smooth-brained chuds can just yuck it up at home. Let's go ahead and jump into the video and take a look.
This is something, a topic that we were switching, of course, between the Trump town hall, mainly watching the Trump town hall, and then the Biden town hall. And the moderators just skimmed over, and this is about as radical far left as you can possibly get. It's not in line with what most Americans believe. It's certainly not in line with what the science tells us, but Joe Biden...
So the topic of transgender individuals is definitely not as far left as you can get. And the majority of Americans are accepting of and supportive of transgender individuals. Many of them don't fully understand it, but they aren't bigots about it. And as far as his comment about science, there is a plurality of data to support the validity of transgender individuals and the validity of transgender youth. I'll go ahead and link Vosh's ultimate research document in the description so you can take a look. He's got an entire section about LGBT people, transgender people, and transgender youth in particular. I'll go ahead and link that in the description so you guys can take a look. He sources a lot of academic papers and a lot of scholarly research pertaining to it from scientists. So yes, science supports the idea of transgender individuals. Crowder's just a moron, but we already knew that.
Flat out just said, I don't know exactly what he means by this, he's going to change the law in regards to not allowing 8-year-olds to transition and get hormone blockers. Let's go to the clip.
So Joe Biden didn't reference anything about changing law in particular. He spoke about changing the administration's approach to transgender individuals. There isn't a law on the books that prevents transgender individuals from existing in public places or from transitioning to the gender that they identify with, and there's no laws on the books prohibiting transgender youth. However, the cultural zeitgeist around children being transgender does need to change, and that can be helped immensely by the opinions of the White House and by the administration therein. The one currently in power has spent the last 4 years trying to disenfranchise the LGBT community at large, but specifically attacking transgender individuals between removing their medical protections under law, by allowing and instructing shelters to identify and turn away transgender individuals, and banning transgender individuals from the military. The current administration is incredibly adversarial to transgender individuals, and Biden here is just confirming that his administration will take a very different stance on it. He didn't say anything about changing laws.
I'm the proud mom of 2 girls, 8 and 10. My youngest daughter is transgender. How will you, as president, reverse this dangerous and discriminatory agenda and ensure that the lives...
Yeah, the woman mentions agenda, not law. She mentions agenda.
And rights of LGBTQ people are protected under U.S. law.
The idea that an 8-year-old child or a 10-year-old child decides, I decided I want to be transgender. That's what I think I'd like to be. It'll make my life a lot easier. There should be zero discrimination. And what's happening is too many transgender women of color are being murdered. They're being murdered.
So I just want to talk for a second about the optics of his response. Now, I will give him the benefit of the doubt. He is old as fuck. The idea of transgender people being mainstream, being socially acceptable, it just wasn't a thing when he was younger. It's a fairly new phenomenon for them to have societal acceptance. So him using the wording, deciding to be trans, deciding that I'm gonna be a girl, that would make my life easier, That's not really what happens, but I understand what he's trying to say. He's trying to say that if a child identifies as a gender other than the one that they were assigned at birth and comes out as transgender, that they should be supported and societally accepted. His phrasing is off, so the optics of his answer are poor, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's old. He probably doesn't know the proper way to phrase it. And I'm fairly certain Crowder is going to jump all over that phrasing.
Huh?
Okay. I have heard a lot of stupid answers.
Sure, right.
He was stuttering, Stephen. Be careful.
But
that answer wasn't stupid. It was poorly worded, but it definitely wasn't stupid. He was supporting the idea of an egalitarian approach to transgender individuals in society. It wasn't stupid. Poorly worded, but it wasn't stupid.
seldom am I at a complete loss for words, sir. And I'm going to try and find them, and hopefully not stutter. Hopefully I'll find my words and not.
Oh, God. See, this is what I was talking about. The man can't finish a sentence or a complete thought without trying to trigger the libs. He knows he's being ableist here. He knows that Joe Biden has a stutter, and he's mocking him for it. It's very apparent that Joe Biden has a stutter, and it's very apparent that he has a very good handle on being able to manage that stutter. That's kind of why his speech habits and his speech patterns are kind of a little janky and jumbled together, because he has certain workarounds to get around his stutter where he may not finish a sentence in the way he originally wanted to or intended to, but he had to change his approach to verbalizing his thoughts because his stutter got in the way.
Not a new stutter that never existed before.
His stutter's well documented. He's been very open about it. Moving on.
A couple of things. Why aren't people complaining that that's offensive? Or said, someone chooses to be transgender.
Right, yeah.
What? I thought sexual preference was supposed to be a term that is offensive.
Oh, it is. Sexual preference, when referring to gay people or bi people or pansexual people, that is offensive because it's not a preference to be attracted to another man or another woman, or to be attracted to all genders. That's just a sexual orientation. A preference would be if someone is particularly attracted to brightly colored hair rather than naturally occurring hair colors. That would be a preference. A sexual orientation refers to the gender and sex of the individuals that you would be sexually attracted to. A preference would be something about the individuals that you're attracted to that you are particularly attracted to. We see this a lot of time becoming problematic, where certain individuals or certain demographics are fetishized, particularly women of color. Like, there's a lot of sweaty white dudes on the internet that are attracted to Asian women pretty much exclusively, and the way they approach their sexual preference to Asian women becomes problematic in the way that they behave and the way that they act towards Asian women. The same thing happens to black women. It also happens to trans men and trans women as well. More so towards trans women. They're more so subject to fetishization than trans men are. But that would be a sexual preference. Sexual orientation and sexual preference are not one and the same. And trying to refer to gay people as having a sexual preference for the same gender, the way Amy Coney Barrett did, is bigoted and is offensive. Now, again, I'm not defending Joe Biden's wording on how he answered the question, but again, he's fucking old. He's not hip with the kids on the new terminology and the correct way to phrase things and the correct way to approach a topic. But the general sentiment of his comments was he was being supportive of LGBT people and trans people in particular.
Right.
It became after Amy Coney Barrett used it because Merriam-Webster changed the definition after Senator Hirono asked her about it. But he's literally saying someone chooses to be transgender. I thought it's an immutable characteristic. You were actually a woman born in the wrong body. That's how the entire basis of modern transgenderism, and it is an ism. People who say don't follow ideologies, if you subscribe to modern transgenderism, that is a secularist ideology. Sorry.
More of what I was talking about. He just has to trigger people. It is not an ideology. It's a scientific fact. Transgender people exist. Gender is on a bimodal distribution, not a gender binary. These things are medical fact, and transgender people fall within the bounds of that medical fact. It is not an ideology. It's not a way of thinking. It's just science.
And it flies in the face of biology.
No, it doesn't.
Then you would have to believe the premise, right? It's entirely predicated on there is a male brain and a female brain, or a male soul and a female soul, I guess, getting into metaphysics, that can be put into the wrong body.
Wrong. There is no such thing as a male brain and a female brain exclusively. There is no such thing as a male soul, though I don't believe in the concept of souls, and a female soul. Gender is a bimodal distribution. Trans people were assigned the incorrect gender at birth based on their sexual characteristics, and they identify with a gender other than the one they were assigned. Transgender people go through a medical transition. Most, not all, but most go through a medical transition to better align with the gender that they identify with rather than the gender they were assigned at birth.
That's why they say you are being misgendered. They say, no, I'm having the surgery to match my actual gender.
Yeah. Well, Joe Biden was just behind because the dictionary definition changed the day before.
Right.
Yeah, he can get updated.
Oh, that poor guy.
Oh my god.
Man, just can't catch a break. I mean, you're right. We haven't seen one word about the idea that there can be a choice as an 8. I mean, setting aside the whole, what can 8-year-olds know or choose, right?
Yeah.
But the idea that he is saying that
I covered this in a previous video. Medical scientists have determined that children as young as 3 can identify with a gender other than the one they were assigned at birth. So an 8-year-old absolutely can.
8-year-olds should be able to choose or have the ability to choose flies in the face of everything that has been told about the transgender movement.
Well, not only that, but also responsible parenting. I mean, listen, an 8-year-old kid is, and this is what's so crazy to me. We've talked about this before because Vox and Salon and all these far-left websites who people used to say, well, I'm a classical liberal, but I'm not.
So I'm kind of catching a theme here. They made a 5-minute video, or talked for 5 minutes during a live stream where they talked for an hour, about the specific wording that Joe Biden used to try and invalidate the entire idea of being a transgender individual or identifying with another gender other than the one you were born with. The fact that he used the word choose, even though it's incorrect, that is the only thing they are talking about, and they are using that specific wording to try and invalidate everything that medical science backs up entirely. This entire video is all about Joe Biden's wording, and I'm sure we all can agree his wording was wrong, despite the fact that the sentiment was on point.
Not far left. This is your candidate.
Yeah.
The candidate who said, I'm just going to change the law. First off, he's not really clear on what.
He never said anything about law. Joe Biden never mentioned law.
That means change the law, but it certainly opens the door to Child Protective Services taking your kids away if the president says that it's abuse of your children to not allow them to be pumped full of hormone blockers as an 8-year-old. And by the way, this is what they sold on the town.
It would be child abuse to deny your child's gender identity and refuse them the medical treatment for any gender dysphoria that they may experience. It would be child abuse. You are abusing your child, and a judge, in my opinion, would be perfectly justified removing the children from that circumstance. Just the same as if a child was being beaten or emotionally abused or psychologically abused or even sexually abused. I would be perfectly fine with them being removed from a situation where they're being psychologically and emotionally abused by having their identity denied and access to medical treatment regarding that denied to them.
Town hall that we went to in Vermont, which if people are watching on YouTube, you have to go to loudoutskyded.com/mugclub because YouTube banned it as a violation of their guidelines, where these people were coaching folks on how to transition their children, which drugs to use, and how to get funded by the government.
Yeah, there was a town hall educating parents on the best way to approach the situation when your child does come out to them saying that they don't identify with the gender they were assigned. That's perfectly reasonable. There are town halls and meetings and conferences for parents all the time on basic parenting. It's not that far off for parents to go and learn about something that's probably a novel idea, that like totally brand new to them. They probably have never even thought about the idea of their child being trans, and now that their child has come out as trans, they need resources, they need information, and I would rather them be informed by a medical professional than just finding random articles online which may misinform them.
They actually present this argument. Well, actually, it's far less harmful if your 8-year-old or your 7-year-old thinks they're transgender. You just put them on puberty blockers, and then if they think that they're not, then they're no worse off. No. They're far worse off. I would say.
Very.
No, they're not. I covered this a couple of videos ago. There are little to no long-term effects to placing your child on puberty blockers and then them being removed on that from them later on. The effects include maybe being an inch shorter. Big deal. If it's a male child, their penis may be a little bit smaller when it fully matures. Big deal. It's not a noticeable difference as far as I've been able to find online, or as far as the information I've been able to find online indicates. And their bone density may be a little bit lower. Other than that, there are no detrimental long-term effects to putting your child on puberty blockers and then having them come off later if they realize that they are not in fact transgender and do not want to transition. However, denying them access to puberty blockers and forcing them to endure a puberty that differs from their gender identity can have a lot of long-term negative effects on your child.
Again, what happened to science? What's the Hippocratic Oath? First, do no harm.
That doesn't apply to that's doctors. That's doctors, not scientists. The Hippocratic Oath applies to doctors. Not all scientists are doctors.
Estrogen being injected into the ass cheek of an 8-year-old who has no concept or ability to have sexual experiences, let alone actually consent to them, and you are pumping them full of hormones that will permanently affect their sex life.
So this just goes to show how fucking stupid Steven Crowder actually is. He has no fucking clue what he's talking about. Nowhere is administering hormones to children. The most that children can get at 8 years old is puberty blockers. There is not a doctor in the country that is prescribing an 8-year-old estrogen. They are giving them drugs that will halt or delay their puberty so that when they are older, they can begin to take hormone injections such as estrogen or testosterone. When they're older, not when they're 8 years old. You're fucking wrong, and you're proving to the world that you're a fucking moron.
And you think that that's the science? No, the science is first do no harm, so let's take them to counseling. Let's see if this is actually an issue where it's biology, or if it's one of the issues, like I have statistics here, 75 to 90% of children who think they have gender dysphoria completely grow out of it.
Based on the information he's showing on the screen here, 6 to 23% of boys and 12 to 27% of girls treated in gender clinics showed persistence of their gender dysphoria into adulthood. Okay, so based on that headline, a full quarter of them, for both boys and girls on the high end, continue their transition. Medical science has shown us that the 75% who don't face no long-term adverse effects from having their puberty halted or postponed. Looking at the second headline here, overall mortality rate for sex reassigned persons was higher during follow-up. Yeah, there's a massive problem with suicidality in the transgender community, and the vast majority of it comes from people like you, Crowder, assholes and pieces of shit that spend their entire day shit-talking transgender people and telling them that their identity and their gender are invalid and that they are trash. That is a massive reason why transgender individuals kill themselves so often. Very little of it has to do with actually transitioning or the effects of gender dysphoria on a person that's been able to receive treatment to abate that. Looking at the third one, while changes over time were equal in both sexes compared to natal males and natal females. Natal is a term that TERFs use and transphobes use to differentiate between trans individuals and cis individuals. So I'm just going to completely discount the third article that he's showing on the screen here because it was clearly written by a transphobe. But the other two, one of them just talks about the high rates of suicidality in transgender individuals, even the ones that are post-op or that have gone through some sort of hormone treatment, which the majority of their suicidality comes from people like Crowder. And the first one shows that a full quarter of them continue with their transition. That's a large portion. If 1 in 4 children continue their transition later in life, but the other 3 don't, the other 3 don't have any long-term adverse effects from puberty blockers. He's wrong about it harming them in the long run, which means that he's wrong about this. He's trying to infer that 3/4 of the children treated at gender clinics get fucked up from the treatment that they received, even though that's not true at all.
Completely grow out of it. But for those who undergo puberty blockers, that number drops to 0. And keep in mind, they're still 19 times more likely to attempt suicide if they actually go into transition. It doesn't.
So what he just said there, which I didn't see on the screen, but he must have had access to other information that wasn't up there, or I missed it, was that children that are treated with puberty blockers continue their transition almost entirely because they aren't forced to experience a puberty for a gender that they don't identify with. It massively helps with their gender dysphoria, and they feel more comfortable as the gender that they identify with. I'd count that as a win. And then he mentions about the suicidality rate in the transgender community, despite the fact that the majority of that comes from pieces of shit like him.
Doesn't get any better just because you pump them full of hormones, which, by the way, we don't know the science. The science isn't in. The science tells us don't do medically invasive procedures on children if you don't know. The science
The science is in. We do know. So you're just wrong?
Tells us that this isn't a biological medical issue, that's a psychological issue, but that's politically incorrect. The science tells us that it causes irreparable damage to the endocrine system, and we know that that is well tied to the neurological system. That's
So, first of all, it's endocrine system, not endocrine system, you fucking smooth brain. And secondly, again, you're wrong. I'll provide links in the description, or I'll provide a link in the description to the ultimate research document that explains all of this shit.
why you also see an attempted suicide rate. It's not just because someone was mad at them when they took a dump at a Target.
No, Crowder. It's because of pieces of shit like you. It's because of assholes like you that refuse to acknowledge the validity of trans people and actually do research into the science behind it. Every fucking thing that he said in this video was 100% false. Every last word out of his fucking mouth. I have such a hard time forcing myself to sit through a Crowder video because, one, he is wrong about almost everything that he says, and two, as we saw in this video, the man can't finish a thought without inserting something into his sentences to trigger the libs. He can't do it. He is physically incapable of just presenting his opinions. He has to try and piss somebody off because that's how he makes his money. He makes his money triggering the libs. That's his brand. I'm surprised his mug club mug doesn't say leftist tears or liberal tears like Ben Shapiro's does. That's how he makes his money. But anyway, this has been Steven Crowder getting basically everything wrong about transgender children and the transgender community at large. And I have been Mick Red too. Feel free to like and subscribe. Follow me at my socials right here. You can follow me on Twitter. I usually post when I go live. You can follow me on Twitch. Hang out there with me while I play some video games. You can even join by Discord so you can join the conversation. But until the next one, peace.